Okay.
Okay, and I will state, Richard Grout, I will state that all members are present and Kyle Loring is doing a presentation / discussion for us. So Kyle, why don't you go ahead? We'll get you started.
Sure, thanks, Dick. Well, I'm thank you for the invitation to talk about initiatives here in San Juan County. I understand from Dick that you've heard that I had an experience with it. I know Dave was referencing that just a moment ago too. Or is it David or Dave? Which one do you prefer?
Dave.
Okay.
Dave on our commission, so I'm going with Dave these days.
Okay, sounds good. I saw it's David on the screen, but you know, I don't know about
I'm
you.
gonna change that.
I
yeah.
went through a hearing where every morning they had to change from Kyle and Katie to my more official name when I'm actually representing somebody. So anyway, I am a lawyer. I'm not establishing an attorney-client relationship. I have no intent to do that here, and none of this should be considered as legal advice, of course. I don't think you would. Obviously, you have your own attorneys through the county, but I always feel more comfortable when I say that up front. And frankly, your attorneys probably appreciate it when I say that too. So, so I had an experience a couple of summers ago. I was working with a group out of Lopez who wanted to establish more stringent whale protection rules through a local initiative. And so the state had just gone through a process to create a 400-yard separation from vessels and the southern resident killer whales. And this group felt that the science supported a 650-yard distance. So we started working on an initiative and put it together, got the signatures actually pretty quickly. As you know, orcas are a hot button issue here in San Juan County. And so they were able to gather pretty readily on a short time frame the right number of signatures. We submitted that. Some of those were discarded, but ultimately it was enough to pass muster with the auditor's office. And so it was prepared to be on the ballot when a lawsuit was filed against it by some whale watch companies. And that's when I got the chance to really explore the contours of our local initiative, but also the state and federal I guess the application of state and federal laws to that. And so I thought I've got a couple minutes I'll share about that. And then I imagine you might have questions. So I do want to turn it over to questions that you have pretty quickly before saying too much. But what I will say is that San Juan County's local initiative power, from what I could tell, is moderately robust. There's kind of one primary limitation, right? And that is, and you've probably, I'm sure you know this if you're working on this already, but it's that financial limitation that you have to make sure that if you are going to require the expenditure of funding, that the funding is provided for through that same initiative process. I will say that in my experience, I'm not sure if people have explored exactly what that means in terms of requiring funding for something. You can imagine that came up as an issue in the litigation in which I was involved. And the position was that that statute did not require funding, specifically require some sort of funding to do something, but instead it created that distance limitation. So it was guiding, it was meant to guide certain actions, but not require funding. That, again, that issue though did not actually arise. I thought we had some pretty strong language when I was relying upon the charter itself, because I include that in my brief, and I pulled that up a little while ago today just to refresh myself a little bit with it. And so I remember reading things from our charter, like the power of the county shall be liberally construed, and in choosing to confer the greatest power of local self-government on the people of San Juan County, consistent with the state constitution. That's a powerful statement, right? That we were trying to give the greatest power of local self-government to the people here. And then the preamble itself also mentions something about asserting greater control over the actions of county government. So when that charter was created, the people creating it certainly thought that they were empowering the people of the county to vet the actions of San Juan County. So I actually didn't encounter much a challenge there. And I can tell you, in that case that I was involved in, the Superior Court judge who reviewed it, he didn't really pay attention to the argument that this initiative required funding. And I will say that basically every argument you can think of was thrown against this initiative to try to knock it down. And that was certainly one of them, that it required funding. He determined that that wasn't the case in ours. So it seems that if there's a local initiative that guides activity that doesn't tell San Juan County that it has to go out and do something as an entity, it may not require that funding. But I'm not sure. That's not a legal opinion. That's just kind of my thoughts off the cuff right now. So what we encountered though was that the greater challenge was not necessarily the limitation in our initiative power in the charter, but instead it was external barriers. And from what I've seen, and I think Dick may have mentioned this to you, my dog just headbutted the door. He does not like to be left out of a meeting. Let's see. I'll just say I haven't found a local initiative that has withstood a legal challenge. I won't say that I've done an exhaustive search and I haven't updated it in a couple of years. I may have missed something, but where a local initiative has been challenged in the courts somewhere in the state of Washington, they haven't done well. I haven't seen one succeed. And that's because there are a lot of barriers at the state level. For example, there's a state law, or the Constitution itself and the jurisprudence that has followed from that has said that where a state law delegates authority to the legislative body at the local level, that power cannot be exercised by initiative. It can only be exercised by the county council here in San Juan County, or city council or town council. So that is a challenge, because there is a state law that delegates to the governing body, in our case, again, the council. What did I wrote down a note about it. That state law delegates police powers and sanitary powers. And then there's some other enumerated powers that are delegated. But the police power is a pretty broad power in the law. It's kind of the health, safety, and welfare of the people. And actually, that's what the county relies upon most of the time, I think, when it's adopting laws. You'd have to ask Randy Gaylord or somebody like that, but it's a pretty regular basis. So that's a really challenging thing to overcome, trying to give some sort of power that isn't already delegated already to the county council. Other issues were that, again, there is a state law that prevents you from having an initiative that addresses administrative issues. Basically, like, how does the county operate or implement its laws? You have to create new laws or policies. You can't do something that kind of tinkers with what's already existing or helps implement it better. And then I think and then other issues arose for us were the fact you can't have an initiative that is preempted by or conflicts with state or federal law. And so this, in our case, the challenge was that the law conflicted or was preempted by the Federal Endangered Species Act and the Marine Mammal Protection Act. And that was something that the Superior Court judge listened to quite a bit as well. So I'll wrap up just by saying there definitely are severe limitations, I think, on local initiatives and whether they'll be upheld if challenged, but they're generally outside of the county, kind of external barriers, and not necessarily ones that at least I perceive as having been created within the initiative itself. That said, there was a lot of speculation when we wrapped up that case about just what you can actually do with an initiative. And so I'd love to hear from anybody on the other side of this video what they think might actually be accomplished. From what I could tell, most things would have been struck down. I should mention too, that's just local initiatives, not statewide initiatives. Certainly state initiatives, there is greater amount of authority there because it doesn't have that same problem with delegated authority to the local governing body. So I think there's probably more power there, but it's challenging to know exactly what you might do with an initiative. So that's, excuse me. Sorry, I should have muted before I cleared my throat, but that's what I've got. If you have any questions, I'd love to entertain them.
My first question, because this was my concern that got me here, was that the signature gathering process and how high the bar is for us in San Juan County, because heck, we have 80% voter turnout for a presidential election. It's a lot of, it's almost 2,000 signatures we'd need to get if we did an initiative right now at 15%. Is that possible to get in your experience? Can we get 2,000 signatures that easily in 120 days?
I don't think that's an insurmountable challenge.
Okay.
To answer with the negative. What I will say is, again, in my experience, I think that the group I worked with had 1 month, maybe a month and a half, just due to how things rolled out and when they got started. And they were able to break through that number pretty easily. Actually, it depends on the issue.
Yeah, as you said, the orcas are very popular here. So, and people were all over the place gathering signatures for that. But
I don't know if you remember the sanctuary city situation or sanctuary county situation too. That was one, I can't recall if they actually got the signatures. They were very close, I know. And then that
we got the signatures.
you did. Okay. Yeah. So that's another one. One of the benefits of having an engaged populace is that I don't think they're just engaged when they go to the ballot. I think they're also engaged in advance of that too. And I also think that percentage requirement, I believe that's from state law, but I'm not completely sure on that.
No,
I don't
it
know.
varies from county to county. But and I think that's a question of what's the fair threshold. King just changed theirs to 10.
Hmm.
I'm terrible at pronouncing some of the names of these counties, but Kalalam just changed theirs to 10, or changed theirs to 10, I think, in 2017. Whatcom is 8 and we're 15. So we have to kind of figure out what the threshold for fairness maybe is in there. But at the same time, we don't want it to be so low. I had another question though, which dealt with that delegation that you were talking about, overcoming the delegation. When we did the sanctuary one, the San Juan County Council accepted that and passed that as an action. So does that overcome the
Yes,
challenge of the delegation?
it does. The county as an entity has a greater amount of power than the people do by initiative. And that's based on, again, the state constitution implementing state laws.
So the whale watching one did not go before the county council. It was just going straight on the ballot.
That's right. And I think, I don't recall exactly why that was or whether the county council declined to take it up. I think that was the issue. I think they weren't interested in taking that on, but it might have been a different outcome if they had adopted it as an ordinance.
Carl, this is Liz. I was just wondering do I have this right that they were sued before it actually, went forward? So they actually, county council, and I could be wrong about this, but county council didn't have a chance to see or weigh in on it. The industry sued the parties before do you know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, if you mean before the ballot, it's true. It was a pre-ballot challenge lawsuit. So yeah, it didn't go to the voters, and the voters didn't get a chance to vote on it before it actually was done,
Right, and
before the appeal.
so I'm being trained that when we're in these meetings, I don't keep asking questions. So that's why I saw Dave's hand go up. So go ahead, Dave. You're muted, Dave.
You're muted.
Who was challenging it? Who was the group of people who were challenges? Were there any politicians? Was the prosecuting attorney or the council challenging it at all?
That's a good question. And my hesitation to answer is that they were involved. The prosecuting attorney did get involved. I don't know if he received any direction from the county council or if he was acting through his independent authority to be involved, because part of the suit, of course, is against the auditor. The auditor has to get involved, right? The county is involved in this lawsuit because you ask the judge to tell the county not to allow it to go to the ballot because otherwise it will, because the signatures have been gathered and the process has occurred properly. So the county was involved that way. And so the prosecuting attorney did participate in the briefing and then the hearing itself too.
And the auditor stayed out of it?
Well, honestly, it's a little confusing to me about just what role people were playing and what they were legally. I don't know if the prosecutor would say they were representing the auditor maybe in that participatory role. I'm not exactly sure, but that is how the prosecuting attorney got involved, was through the auditor being named as a defendant in the suit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions?
Kyle, given what you said about you're not aware of an initiative that's withstood a lawsuit, what would that tell us? Any changes we might or might not make to our home rule charter based on the lessons you've learned? Like, is there, and these folks here know, so I had walked across the country with a group of people in 2014 from LA to DC. And that was this thing we heard over and over and over again, town after town, city after city, is that they didn't have the protections they thought they had. And that's what I hear you saying. is we're sitting here thinking that we have the right to self-govern, but in fact, we don't.
Yeah, I think that's right. Before you went down that road, I was going to say, like, it depends on whether you want the initiative power to have any body or not, you know, to be successful or not. In terms of lessons learned, I don't think that we could, I'm not sure that I see an opportunity at the local level to change our charter to somehow grant more authority through that initiative process, because I think it does a lot of that. Again, the one barrier I see is that financial element. But other than that, the charter language about initiatives and the power that the people reserve for ourselves in our county through that initiative process is bold and broad, I think. And that's why the initiative, I think, was struck based on other factors, on conflicts with state laws themselves. And it seems to me that if we want to have greater power at the local level through the initiative process, we're going to have to work through the state legislature to make that happen.
So what would you do on the financial side to make it better for our people?
Well, it's a good question. I honestly, I don't really have value judgments about it exactly that way, you know, about better or worse or what I would do on the financial side. I think it's a decision that has to be made. You know, I don't know if there was a legal basis for that provision outside of our county. I'm not sure if there's some sort of state basis for that. Patty might know, or she might be waiting to ask a question.
Yeah, I'm waiting to make a comment on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
The financial side, there is an issue. What if it was just requiring an analysis for how much this would cost, but not necessarily saying, okay, now how will you pay for it? Because that seemed to be like we'd have to make a new tax or we'd have to do something and tell the voters. Whereas if we say, this is how much it costs and it's up to the county to figure out how to pay for it. I mean, can that work?
I think you could have some sort of analysis language in there and that be a requirement.
Rather than
Process.
having to have, you know, we're going to pay for it this way.
Maybe. I don't know. You know, some of these answers are things I don't know and haven't really had the chance to look into or need for that. I do think I can appreciate I can appreciate the reason for having that provision in place initially.
Yeah, I can too.
Because there are a lot of ways to spend county money and there's only so much county money to spend. So you can see why they wanted, whoever crafted that wanted to make sure the county council wasn't put in the position of having to cut other programs just to support an initiative. There might be times when that makes sense, but I can understand that you wouldn't want to be in that position.
Well, I was just looking at last meeting we had, somebody said fiscal impact is different from how it will be paid. And that's all I was getting at, to state what the fiscal impact is without having to say how it will be paid. I mean, obviously it's got to be paid somehow. And maybe we should figure that out if we're going to do an initiative. But I don't know, somebody thinks maybe there's a better way.
Dave?
I think the difference between those two is the how it's going to be paid would have to be something that would be a part of the amendment, and then the fiscal impact would be something that would be going on the ballot to support or defeat the amendment, that the language that's proposed. I think that I think what we're talking, if I'm not mistaken, we're talking about is what's the message on the ballot versus the actual language that would be changing in the charter. Does that make sense to everybody? Does everybody agree?
No.
Okay.
I don't. I think the fiscal impact, and I mean, like I told you guys before, I had to deal with this in the state. Fiscal impact is, what is this thing going to cost? Just in absolute terms, what's our best estimate of the cost of doing this? And then if it goes through the council has to decide, okay, if that's what it's going to cost, how are we going to pay for it? What are we going to do? Or if it goes straight to the ballot, and it's not clear to me what the difference is, how those two things happen. If it goes straight to the ballot, the voters would know what's the fiscal impact, but they wouldn't necessarily know how's it going to get paid for.
Right.
Right. I guess so, yeah.
Anne Marie?
So in every situation statewide, can a third party come in and close the initiative down with a lawsuit? I'm just asking everybody that. I don't know. The first time I heard about this was with the whale group. And so I never heard of that coming in and knocking the whole thing out. Is that just
Kyle?
standard?
Kyle,
I can touch briefly on that, I think. And I don't think that somebody could challenge an initiative without having some impact to them or a group they represent, something like that. You can't go to court without having some effect on you, basically. You may be familiar with standing, and that's used often in environmental cases. Actually, you have to prove that you're going to have some sort of impact to yourself, to your interests. And in that instance, that was an issue actually, but that was one where the whale watch vessels were able to prove, or the owners, that they did have that sort of standing to bring the claim itself. So you'd have to have some sort of connection to the impact of the initiative.
So that takes me to, like, why was California able to pass a cigarette tax in the early 90s and not be sued by the tobacco companies to stop? I mean, I'm just trying to play it out and understand how that happens in this situation, because there would be an impact on everybody that smoked, just like there's an impact on everybody that runs a whale watching vessel.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that process.
and
Or where they do
and
challenges.
Kyle, wouldn't different state laws also affect that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sure.
Other questions? And Liz, we can't see you, so you'll have to speak up if you have another question.
So Carl, do I understand what you're saying is that when the local and state laws are in sync, then the initiative is going to have a lot more power if it is challenged. And if they're not in sync, then that's highly likely that whoever's brought the suit is going to prevail.
Well, I think it depends a little bit on what you mean by in sync that way, but definitely if a local law is not conflicting with a state law or isn't somehow preempted by a state law, and state laws can preempt local laws expressly. They can say counties do not have any authority to do X, Y, or Z because we are doing that at the state legislative level. Or they can do it by implication too, where a state law is so comprehensive that there's really no room for a local government to act in that sphere because state law is just taking it over. So where the local initiative is consistent with a state law, then it cuts out at least that basis for it being invalid or invalidated.
Can I,
Does
one
that
more
answer your
comment?
question?
A question.
Yeah, Dave.
Just a simple question. Has there been an initiative passed and that is now law in our county? I don't know. Do we know of one?
Well, the sanctuary made it through, and the real estate excise tax made it through.
And was the GMO thing by initiative, or was that
They were both endorsed.
That's the
by
example I think of.
council.
yeah.
The GMO.
Yeah, the GMO initiative was adopted by initiative, a local initiative here in San Juan County.
Okay.
I think, the sanctuary county, that one ultimately was adopted by the county council, which took it to a little bit of a different
Right.
avenue that way. And again, that cuts out, basically if the county council adopts it, then there are fewer grounds to challenge it later on. I don't think the GMO initiative was challenged either before or after it went to the ballot.
Kyle, it's Liz. Or Dick, it's Liz.
Yeah, go ahead, Liz. Sorry.
So an initiative has its most strength when the council adopts it versus it going to the people and getting signatures. Is that what I heard you say? Less
Yeah,
likely that it'll be challenged.
It
Unless, like-
decreases the different claims you can make to challenge it, is what I would say. If the county council adopts it, it kind of it doesn't bulletproof it completely, but it does some of that. Because you cannot then at that point, you can't challenge an initiative by saying, well, only the county council can adopt a law like this. No, the county council just did. They were the ones who adopted that initiative via that ordinance and initiative adoption process.
Go ahead, Patty.
So the process here is that, we do an initiative and then present it to the council, and then it's up to them whether they want to make a law out of it, right? At that point, they can make the law, or it'll go to the.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. They can choose to adopt it whole cloth before it goes to the voters.
Or they can create their own, and that's kind of outlined in the charter. They can create their own, and you'd have two on there that were opposing. But either way, they can adopt it, or you can bring in the signatures and pressure them to adopt it. That's what happened with the sanctuary. They were pressured to adopt it, and they were squeezed into a period of time where they didn't have time to write their own initiative because they did not want to adopt it.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle. If you don't do the signature gathering, it's not an initiative. That's just asking the council to take an action. But if you do the signature gathering and it goes to the council, then the council can adopt it and it doesn't have to go to the ballot, or they can let it go to the ballot. But for it to be an initiative, you have to do the signature collection.
That's
Patty?
right. And
Patty?
then once it's certified by the auditor, that's right, it moves forward.
And
Right.
there's that other mini initiative thing, which is kind of cool. Say you only get 3% signatures, you can still bring it to the council and say, can you make this into a law? It won't go on the ballot, but you
Right.
can still present it to the council.
Right, but it won't go on the ballot. You got to have
Right.
those required signatures to do that if the council doesn't want to take it up.
Right. But at least you can get something to the council that way with a little bit of pressure behind it.
Okay. Any other questions? Liz? Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Kyle, do you have any opinion about electronic signature gathering?
Yeah.
No. I don't, I have no opinion.
Thumbs anywhere for down?
I don't know. I think if there's a way to gather electronic signatures, that's a safe and secure way to do it and submit that to the county for their verification. And it makes it easier for people to exercise their rights. Maybe that's not a bad thing. I like absentee ballots. I like anything that allows people to vote.
Mhm.
Amen.
Yeah.
Okay, Liz, do you have anything
No, thank you, Kyle.
for the rest of us? Out of questions? Okay. Oh, Patty.
Nope, that was a thumbs up.
Oh, okay. All right. Kyle, thank you very much.
Sure, it was my pleasure. Thanks all, and thanks for doing the work you're doing with the charter review.
Thank you, Kyle.
And our apology for the delay. Thanks for
Yes.
flexing with that.
Not a problem at all.
All righty.
I'll see
Have
you
a good
later.
night.
Good night.
Okay. Next item on the agenda I put on there was, is there any discussion we want to pursue based on what you just heard? Or is that something you want to think about and we would talk about next week? Patty?
Yeah, I think because of our late start that we probably should put that off till next week. But he more or less gave us an overview of what happened in his experience with the one initiative. But I think that to me, it strengthened, yes, we need the initiative process, and let's look at the signature gathering if it's enough. But and the other thing about electronic signatures would be cool. I don't know. I think it gives us food for thought for next week. I don't think that we're able to talk about it tonight.
And along those lines, if you notice, the next thing I had on the agenda was I was hoping we would prioritize the issues that, you know, we all put together that are in front of this committee, but maybe you all would rather put that off until next week. I'll leave it up to you. Or maybe you haven't had enough time to think about it because I didn't get the agenda out until yesterday. What's your pleasure? Patty?
I don't know if we have all that many issues, but we have maybe 3 or 4. So that simplifies things if we can state what those issues are, and maybe during the week we can figure out what that is and present that next week. But I don't think we have that many issues. I think our initiative and process is a strong one. We just want to make it stronger. And so we'll discuss what makes it stronger.
Okay.
And we're lucky to
Dave?
have what we have.
Dave?
There's a guy I know, I've met him once or twice. His name's John Bowden. He has a company called Elections Trust. And they ran a election for King County conservation districts online. It was the only online election they've had in the state of Washington. And he was able to certify it because of the nature of conservation districts, how they're kind of a private public thing. He
Right.
might be an interesting person to talk with or get some feedback from on the viability of electronic signature gathering. His company, if anybody company could do it, a contract to do it, it would probably be his. And so he might have a idea about how viable that is.
Are you willing to
Yeah.
approach him and see what you can find out?
Yeah, I think he'd help us see if that's something we can continue to pursue.
Okay.
What
And
was
then-
his name? Who?
Elections Trust. John Bowden.
Thank you.
And he did a I'm not sure what year, but he did a King County Conservation District elections. It was online.
And he lives here as of the last few years, doesn't he?
Really?
I think so.
Whoa, I had no idea that.
He owns a place here because a good friend told me he made a big donation to the Family Umbrella Group. And I think he said he at least lives here part-time, was my understanding.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Might be pretty easy to get a hold of him.
Yeah, I met him in Bellevue, so that's
Yeah.
Bellevue.
Well,
Cool.
you can ask him.
Yeah.
It's amazing who lives in the San Juans.
Anne Marie.
So
Marie, I know, crazy.
it seems like we really need to have some kind of discussion around the percentage and where we want to be on the percentage. It seems like, you know, when you look at these other counties, that 15% seems high, but I'm not sure what we need, what information we need to either confirm that that's a good number or say that maybe it shouldn't be that high, or, you know, I don't know that it needs to be any higher, but I'm not sure who we would talk to kind of crystallize our thoughts on that.
Well, that, to me, that seems like an issue that at some point we would want to put to the whole group and see what people's feelings are. I mean, it's useful having the information of what other counties have done.
Mhm.
I think we have to keep in mind how much smaller our population is than those other places. Even Clallam has quite a few more people than we do. Patty?
Well, I'm just saying that, you know, we do have a smaller population, which means it's a bit of a challenge to get these signatures, because you can go to the farmer's market, you can go to King's, you can go to all these different places. You still see the same people. And we do have a smaller population, but we have a lot of people voting by mail and a lot of people getting in there. And like I say, 80% on the presidential election, we'd have to get 2,000 signatures. Or almost 1,900 something. And that's just a lot for our small community. Sure, there's 15,000 people in the whole county, or maybe 16 or 17. depending on. But I just think it's kind of high. One of the reasons you don't want to have initiatives being brought up right and left that are, they don't count. I mean, there's a word for it, but the older I get, the more my
Frivolous.
language leaves me.
How about frivolous?
Frivolous. We don't want frivolous initiatives, but
I'm like,
so I don't know. I think if we could have electronic signatures, that would make it a lot easier. But then you have to get the people interested in the initiative in the first place in order to go online and sign it. And so there's just a whole lot of difficulty in educating people about anything out there. Yeah, anything.
well, how about, and, oh, Liz, before I make a comment, do you have anything?
I was gonna ask Anne Marie, do I have the right subcommittee that you had offered to put together kind of a spreadsheet? Okay, you're muted, but I saw the,
I can do that, yeah.
yeah, you had talked about that and that just seemed really valuable to me and valuable to share with the whole group.
So, yes, I agree with that. But how about each of us identifies what we believe are the issues that are before us, put them in your rank order, and distribute them to everybody before the next meeting, so we all have a chance to look at them. And that would be a major topic of discussion. And let's get a good feel for where we are. Were you raising your hand, Anne Marie?
I
Oh,
was just doing that.
okay. All right. So that actually, that kind of puts us in the next steps, what to do. And also under next steps, I wanted to bring up something. I'm on 4 subcommittees plus the big meeting. I have another weekly Zoom unrelated to the CRC, and I have another weekly activity that, thank God, is not a Zoom. And I'm just finding myself way overextended. So I have decided I'm going to withdraw from this subcommittee. I just can't keep doing 4 of them. And I talked to Patty today, and she is willing to be the chair. She may ask one of you if you're willing to be the note taker. So I hope that's okay. But I just can't keep doing 5 of these. It's just too much. And I looked at, partly because as a couple of you said, I think the issues are pretty clear. We don't have as many as a lot of the other committees. And my guess is this subcommittee may be ready with things to bring back to the whole group before anybody else is. It just sort of feels that way. So it seemed like, to me, it was the one that I could give up with a minimum of guilt.
But Dick, who's gonna rein us in?
Right?
Yeah, well, I told Kevin, I bounced it off Kevin first because I said, I don't want to surprise you. And I said, the other reality is, and I said, we actually talked about this, I think, in our first meeting, that I feel like I would probably spend a lot of time on the short end of 4-to-1 votes. And I said, I feel like sometimes I'm just the ultimate pragmatist in this and trying to say, wait. So, I mean, I think it'll be fine because there will be people like me in the larger group who are going to say those things. I'm finding it very amusing, frankly, that, I consider myself a liberal, but I am a pragmatist. And I find myself in this group thinking, geez, I feel like one of the conservatives. And it's probably, part of that comes from having worked in county government and state government and looking at how things work and thinking, okay, what can you make work and what can you get the voters to approve? So, but that's just my view.
So Dick, I have a question, which is, when you say this group, are you talking about you and the four of us, or are you talking about the whole CRC
In what context?
in terms of feeling like you're the more conservative side?
Oh, well, actually, in this group, definitely, but to some degree in the larger group, it has really taken me by surprise, because I'm usually, out there wanting to get things done and change things. And I told my wife, I said, I'm finding this kind of amusing. I said, maybe I'm getting old and crotchety. I don't know.
And I
Patty.
have a question too.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just wanted to say something about our community and the fact that I'm a bit conservative in a lot of things too, but I'm totally a progressive liberal, whatever. And I think the community is like that too. And if we just sit down and talk to each and every one of us, we can find things we agree on. I'm not surprised about it at all here. I mean, I still am a little surprised that there are Trump people out there, but that's just the way I am. And there are some in our community, but I think even, I don't know, I'm not surprised. And yes, conservatism, we all need to have some of it. I worked at the University of Washington for 44 years in budgets and stuff. So I know we need to think about administration and budgets and what will pass. And,
Yeah.
and we will miss you.
Thank you. Liz, you had something?
So two things. One, if we put this to a vote, you're going to lose. And you're not going anywhere.
Thank you. And I will tell you, in response to, this little short discussion, some of you are old enough to remember who Tip O'Neill was, the Speaker of the House. He said something years and years ago, it gets quoted all the time, but it given my time in government, it really struck me as the absolute truth. And that was that politics is the art of the possible. And so I'm always thinking that way. Okay, what's doable? And Maureen C. and I had some discussions about this, that you can't put things on the ballot out of the blue that will just scare people, or they'll say, what the hell is this? Or where did this come from? Because they'll never pass. And so that's part of what affects my judgment.
And the other thing I wanted to ask of you is, does it fall within your bandwidth and the rules and regulations that if at some point when we're about ready to present to the larger group, would you be willing to come back in for a meeting and let us do a soft launch and hear your thoughts before taking it to the whole group?
Oh, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. I
You
feel
might
better
not
about.
You might not like my reaction, but
But it would
no,
be prudent of us to do that.
yeah. Oh, I'd be happy. I'd love to do it. Yeah, that'd be great. I'm flattered that you would even ask me to do that.
Well, with that, it's easier to wish you well, because I think having your input is quite valuable in this group. And I understand that, 4 of these is with the other things all of us have in life, that's too many. And so I respect your taking care of yourself and your family.
Yeah, my wife said, "You're going to do one of these every day."
Yeah.
So, okay.
So.
And actually, yeah, if you have me back to do a dry run, I'll be your test run, so you know how to respond to the people who are critical when you're in front of the whole commission.
Precisely.
You'll have your answers already.
And before we begin to wrap up, Patty, I don't know if we could resolve the note taker thing now. It's not a skill I have, so I can't offer it. My mother always said I spell like Einstein poorly. So but I would be happy to host if that's any help to you. It's not a big deal, but so I didn't know if
Yeah.
Anne Marie or Dave, I'm just no good at it.
I think I would go for that, you know, because this is just a little committee and the host is the person who directs it. And obviously I can go off on tangents and you'd probably be better off with somebody else. As far as note taking, by the way, I reread what I sent out before and I found I used the word effect instead of affect. Sorry about that. But I was taking notes tonight. It's not, you know, I can hardly read what I took, but I don't know. Dick asked me to be the leader, which was very cool. I'm happy with that. At the same time, I don't need to be. And if you want to do it, great. And I'll
Let me-
continue to take notes.
Patty, let me clarify. When I say host, I meant like accepting people into the room. So
Oh.
I'm sorry if I was saying. you know, I would-
Oh, sorry about that. Yes, please.
you know, yeah,
Please act as host and bring people into the room. And yes, I'll be the leader then. And I can take some notes. They are not, you know, while we're talking, I put down something while we're talking, while other people are talking. So it's not that difficult to take notes about what's going on in the meeting. I won't be as good a leader as Dick.
And I should explain, I eliminated Anne Marie and Dave because they're chairing other committees. So it was between Liz and Patty, and it was like, okay,
Yeah.
flip a coin. And so I asked Patty, and but it doesn't have to be. That's up to you guys, how you want to do it. But the other thing I would say in terms of note taking, keep in mind, that's why it's so critical to record the meetings, because if we record it, that's the legal record. So the notes, the meeting notes are really just for our benefit for primarily, or for someone who doesn't want to listen to the recording and just wants to get the gist of what was discussed. And that's why I told Patty initially, I said, look, just take note of the subjects we discussed. And if we make a decision, record the decision and what the vote was. And that's really all it is. It's not like you're sitting there writing down everything everybody says.
Yeah. And I did write a lot of stuff that I'm not even going to put in the notes. Because
But-
briefer, it's fine. You know, just when you're writing down a conversation, that doesn't need to go in the notes. But if there's something that can remind us about something we did talk about, then I'll put that in there.
Okay. And, you know, I'll leave that to you guys. But I won't see you again for a while until the regular meeting, although some of you are in some of my other meetings. Okay,
Thank you so much.
are we good for this evening?
So,
Yes, I will declare us adjourned.
thank you.
For the
Okay.
recording.
Night.
Yeah.
You need to stop the recording.